In Peru, men once walked into the ground beneath these stone walls and never came out. For 500 years, the people of Cusco have told the same dark story, that under the city lies a buried labyrinth, a maze of Inca tunnels so long and so deep that anyone who enters is swallowed alive. They said the Inca used it to hide their gold from the Spanish cow. Tons of it, melted, sacred, and gone. And they said the few treasure hunters brave enough to go looking never returned. One of them, the legend goes, crawled out of a church wall years later, dying, clutching a single ear of corn made of solid gold. For generations, the experts called all of it a fairy tale, folklore, a story to frighten children. There was no maze, they said. There was no gold, but in 2025, two archaeologists aimed modern scanning machines at the dirt beneath Cusco, and the official story collapsed, because the machines found it, a man-made void, running more than a mile beneath the streets, the churches, and the giant megalithic walls, exactly where the legend always said it would be. The labyrinth is real, and everything the experts spent 500 years denying is now coming up out of the dark. This is the story of the Chinkana. To understand why this matters, you have to stand for a moment in front of the walls themselves. High above the city of Cusco sits a place called Sacsayhuaman. It is one of the most astonishing pieces of stonework on the entire planet. Enormous blocks of limestone, some weighing well over 100 tons, fitted together so tightly that you still cannot slide a sheet of paper between them. No mortar, no cement, just impossible stone, cut and locked into place more than 5 centuries ago. For the Inca, this was not only a fortress, it was the head of a sacred animal. The whole city of Cusco was laid out in the shape of a puma, a great cat, and Sacsayhuaman was its skull. Below it, at the other end of the city, stood the Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun, the single most sacred and most golden building in the entire Inca Empire. Its walls were once sheeted in gold, and the legend always said the same thing, that beneath the ground a secret passage ran from the head of the puma all the way down to its heart. Here is the question that has hung over Cusco for centuries, the question the textbooks could never answer. If these tunnels were real, if the Inca truly carved a hidden road beneath their own sacred capital, then what were they for? And what did they carry through the dark that they did not want anyone above to see? This was not a small claim. The legend spoke of a network stretching for miles, deep enough that you needed a rope tied at the entrance just to find your way back. And for 400 years, mainstream history refused to take any of it seriously. There was no proof, they insisted. No map, no measurement, no entrance anyone could point to. The people of Cusco were told their own oldest story was a superstition. The trouble was, the one piece of evidence that could have settled the argument had been deliberately blown up. Sealed shut on purpose more than a century ago, so that for generations no one could prove a thing. The story of the tunnels begins not with the Inca, but with the men who conquered them. When the Spanish arrived in Cusco in the 1530s, they did not just take the city, they tore the heart out of it. The golden temple of the sun was stripped. Its treasure was melted down. A great deal of it was handed over as ransom for the captured Inca ruler Atahualpa, who was executed anyway in 1533. And right on top of the sacred Sun Temple, the Spanish built a church, the convent of Santo Domingo, as if to bury the old gods under the new one. But almost immediately, the conquerors started hearing the rumors. The local people spoke of a labyrinth beneath the city. In the Quechua language, they called it the Chinkana. The word does not mean tunnel. It means something far more unsettling. It means the place where you get lost, the labyrinth, the maze that swallows people. And the written record is older than most people realize. As early as 1590, a Spanish chronicler named Martín de Murúa wrote of a strange temple shaped like the head of a serpent, built by the Inca emperor Huayna Capac, a place tied to dark ritual and the watching of the stars. A few years later, an anonymous Jesuit priest, writing around the end of the 1500s, described the entrance to a deep cave at the fortress of Sacsayhuaman. And a cave, he wrote, that crossed the entire city underground and came out far below at the hill of San Cristobal, near where Santo Domingo now stands. Another Jesuit, Anello Oliva, wrote of many underground passages running beneath the streets, even beneath the houses of the archbishop himself. And then there is the most famous witness of all, Inca Garcilaso de la Vega, a man born in Cusco in 1539, half Inca, half Spanish, the son of a conquistador and an Inca princess. In his great History of the Incas, published in 1609, Garcilaso wrote that as a boy he and his friends used to play near the mouth of these tunnels. He wrote of underground streets and avenues, as long as the great towers themselves, all connected beneath the city, but he also wrote a warning. The children never went far inside, because everyone knew that those who wandered too deep did not come back. For the people of Cusco, those were never just stories. They hardened into something darker over the centuries, into a chain of disappearances. The most famous tale tells of a group of young men who entered the great Chinkana with ropes and torches, hunting for the lost Inca gold. They tied one end of a rope at the entrance and vanished into the dark. Months passed. They were given up for dead. And then, the story goes, during a mass inside the church of Santo Domingo, the very church built over the Sun Temple, the worshippers heard a sound coming from inside a wall, a low moaning. They broke through the stone, and out of the darkness came one of the lost young men, half mad, near death, his beard grown long, and in his hands a single ear of corn made of solid gold. He died within days, and he never explained how he had crossed the whole city underground to reach that wall. The others were never found. Whether you believe a word of it or not, the meaning was clear. The Chinkana takes people, and sometimes it gives back gold. But legends are not evidence, and that was always the problem. Because the one entrance everyone agreed was real had been closed on purpose. In the 19th century, the prefect of Cusco, a man named General San Roman, grew tired of people wandering into the tunnels and never returning, and so, around 1841, he ordered the passages sealed, blasted shut with explosives, and walled over. An American traveler named Ephraim George Squire passed through Cusco a few decades later and recorded exactly that in his 1867 account. The deeper branches of the labyrinth, he wrote, could no longer be followed because the prefect had ordered them walled up, and so the proof was gone. The mouth of the maze was buried, and for the next century and a half, the Chinkana slipped back into the realm of folklore, a campfire story for a city that had simply learned to live on top of its own mystery until two people decided to stop guessing round and start listening to the ground. This is where everything changes, because in 2025 the tools finally arrived that could settle a 400-year-old argument without lifting a single stone when is led by two Peruvian archaeologists, Jorge Calero Flores and Mildred Fernandez Palomino. When their starting point was not a shovel, it was the old chronicles. They went back to the Jesuit writings, to Garcilaso, to the anonymous priest who described the cave at Sacsayhuaman, and they treated those centuries-old words as a map. They also leaned on the work of Manuel Chavez Bayón, the man often called the father of archaeology in Cusco, who had long suspected the answer was hiding directly beneath the city's own roads and sidewalks. Follow the streets, he had said. Look under the pavement. And that is exactly what they did. The first technique they used sounds almost absurdly simple. It is called acoustic prospecting. The team took a metal plate and struck it against the ground, again and again, every 50 centimeters, walking the suspected route step by step, and they listened, because solid earth and hollow space do not answer the same way. Over a tunnel, the sound changes. It deepens. It rings with the particular emptiness of a void below. Where the ground answered hollow, they marked it. And slowly, strike by strike, a line began to appear across the map of Cusco, a line that matched the old chronicles almost exactly. But sound alone is a clue, not a confirmation. So for the second phase, they brought in something far more powerful, ground-penetrating radar. The machine, donated by a Swiss company called Prosec, works by firing electromagnetic waves down into the earth and reading what bounces back. Think of it as a way to take an X-ray of the ground without ever breaking it open. Dense rock and packed soil reflect the signal one way. An empty cavity reflects it another Schult. By dragging the radar along the route the sound tests had marked, the team could build a picture of what lay beneath their feet, the meters down, in the dark, untouched. And what the radar drew for them was not a vague smudge. It was structure, walls, a ceiling, a passage with shape and intention. In January of 2025, Calero and Fernandez stood before a press conference at the municipality of Cusco and said the thing that no serious archaeologist had ever been willing to say out loud: the Chinkana is real. The radar had traced a main tunnel running roughly 1,750 meters, more than a mile, starting beneath the fortress of Sacsayhuaman and running straight down through the city to the Coricancha, exactly as the legends had always insisted. The passage, they explained, sat between 1.5 and 2.5 meters beneath the surface. The cavity itself was around 1 meter to 2.5 meters wide, and a little over 1.5 meters tall. Calero offered one quiet, haunting detail about its size, and it was wide enough, he said, that an Inca ruler could have been carried through it on a litter, hidden from every eye above. And it did not stop at one tunnel. The scans revealed that the main passage was only the spine of something larger. The team traced 3 separate branches splitting off from it, one running toward a site called Calispucio, one reaching into the Muyukmarca sector of the Sacsayhuaman fortress itself, and a third crossing toward the Temple of San Cristobal, a web of corridors threading beneath the living city, and the deeper they looked, the bigger it became. As the investigation went on, Fernandez estimated that the full network might stretch as far as 8 kilometers, nearly 5 miles of hidden passage knitted beneath the streets, the plazas, even running close to the great cathedral and the old palace of the archbishop. She described it in words that came almost directly from Garcilaso himself, a complex, interconnected system. Exactly the kind of place, she said, where you would have needed a rope just to keep from getting lost. For 400 years, that rope had been just a detail in a ghost story. Now a scientist was using the same image to describe what her radar had found. That is the moment a legend stops being a legend. So what was this network actually for? And here the honest answer is the most interesting one. Because the truth is, we do not fully know yet. And the archaeologists are careful to say so. The radar can show that the space exists. It cannot yet tell us what moved through it. But the clues point in a few directions, and each one is its own kind of remarkable. The first is movement. The Inca ran an empire of around 10 million people, stitched together by more than 25,000 miles of road, and they did it without the wheel and without iron tools. A hidden road below ground, linking the empire's holiest sites, fits that obsession with connection perfectly. A way to move priests, rulers, and sacred objects between the fortress and the temple unseen. The second is defense. In a time of war, a sealed underground route would let the rulers inside Sacsayhuaman slip down into the heart of the city without ever crossing open ground. The third is the one the chronicles whispered about most, the sacred. To the Inca, the ground was not just dirt. It was the body of Pachamama, the Earth Mother, the inside of the living world. A tunnel into the earth was a tunnel into a god, a place for ritual, for offering, for touching the powers below. There is one more detail that refuses to sit quietly. When Calero stood at the entrance of the smaller passage, the Chinkana Chica, he pointed to a weathered block of stone near the opening, a stone shaped, unmistakably, like the head of a serpent. And he remembered what Martín de Murúa had written back in 1590, of a serpent-headed temple raised by the Emperor Huayna Capac. This, Calero believes, may be the very structure the old chronicler described, a stone serpent, marking the mouth of the maze, sitting in plain sight for 400 years while the world called the whole thing a myth. He is careful to call it a belief, not a proven fact, but a dated. But standing there, with the radar data in hand and the serpent in stone before him, the line between the written legend and the buried reality grows very thin. Went Symes. And then there is the question nobody in Cusco has ever stopped asking. The gold. Remember what the legends always claimed. That when the Spanish came for the treasure of the Sun Temple, the Inca used these very tunnels to carry their sacred gold and silver down into the dark away from the conquerors, and that some of it was never seen again. For centuries that was dismissed along with everything else, of a treasure hunter's fantasy, but now the tunnels are no longer a fantasy. The radar has proven the road exists, the same road the chronicles tied directly to the hiding of the Inca's holiest treasures. No one is saying a chamber of gold is waiting at the end. The archaeologists are far too careful for that. But for the first time in 500 years, the question is no longer foolish. If the passages are real, and the chronicles that describe them were right about the route, then what else were they right about? That is the thought that keeps the people of Cusco staring at their own floors. For now, the deep tunnels remain closed, not by a Spanish general this time, but by simple danger. The passages are old, some partly collapsed, and to enter them without preparation would be to risk becoming the next name in a story that already has too many. The team has identified key points where they hope to dig down and finally place a camera, and then a person, inside the void the machines have found. That is the moment everyone is waiting for. The first human being in nearly 2 centuries to stand inside the Chinkana and look down a corridor the Inca sealed Unthinkable. But they are moving slowly, and they are right to, because whatever is down there has waited 500 years, it can wait a little longer to be done properly. And this is what makes the Chinkana different from a tomb that gets opened, photographed, and filed away. This story is not finished. It is unfolding right now. beneath a city where people are drinking coffee and catching buses directly above a labyrinth that science has only just confirmed is real. The radar has drawn the map. The chronicles have been proven right. The serpent stone is waiting at the door, but the corridors themselves, where they truly lead, what the Inca carried through them, and whether the gold the legends promised is still sitting somewhere in the dark, all of that is still untouched. The scans did not close the mystery of Cusco, they cracked it open. So the next time you see a photograph of those impossible stone walls in Peru, the giant blocks, the perfect joints, the fortress shaped like the head of a great stone cat, I remember that the most astonishing thing about that place may not be what the Inca built above the ground at all. It may be what they carved beneath it, and sealed, and trusted the dark to keep. The maze is still there. The map has finally been drawn. And the first step into the labyrinth is coming. If this story pulled you in, leave a comment below. What do you think the Inca really moved through those tunnels in the dark? And if you want to be here when someone finally walks into the Chinkana, make sure you are subscribed, because that day is coming, and the labyrinth is ready to give up the next piece of its secret.